Welcome to the Deep Dive for January 15th, 2025. We're going deep on the latest cyber and tech news. Like always, we got Schneier on security, CSO online, got the hacker news, of course, and a bunch more. It's going to be a good one.
It's amazing how much changes every single day in this space, right? We'll break down what happened, but more importantly, what it all means for you, for me, everyone.
Okay, so where do we even start?
Yeah.
Ransomware, right? Like it never goes away.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting stuff happening on the prevention side, too.
Yeah, for sure. Ransomware is a huge problem, and it's not going anywhere. The Alliance Risk Barometer, it's like the big report. It says cyber attacks are the top concern for businesses globally for the fourth year in a row, and ransomware is a huge part of that. And they're even more worried about how AI could make these attacks even worse.
Wow, fourth year in a row. That's crazy. So what are we seeing out there? One story that caught my eye was this new ransomware hitting Amazon Web Services, like specifically their S3 buckets.
Oh yeah, this one's kind of tricky. They're using this encryption method. It's called SSEC, and basically attackers get their hands on your access keys, and because of the way AWS works, you can't get your data back even if you pay the ransom. It's a pretty big deal.
So paying the ransom isn't even an option here. Yikes. What can AWS users do to protect themselves?
Good news is there are things you can do. Experts are saying limit the use of SSEC as much as you can, first off, and then make sure you're always checking your AWS key permissions, make sure no one's snuck in there. Oh, and good logging, always good to have that so you can see if something's fishy. Basic cyber hygiene stuff, but it can really make a difference.
Right. It's like the simple stuff sometimes gets overlooked, but it's so important. Okay, so speaking of things that can be overlooked, we got to talk about that Fortinet Zero Day, the one that's been exploited for months.
Yeah, that's a nasty one. Attackers can completely bypass authentication, get super admin privileges on Fortinet 40OS. That's their operating system for firewalls. A lot of other security stuff, too. And the crazy part is, this has been going on since at least October of last year.
Oh man, super admin access, that sounds terrifying. So patching, that's the first step, right?
100%. Fortinet put out patches, get those on ASAP, like yesterday. But it's bigger than just this one vulnerability, It shows us how important it is to have a multi-layered approach to security. Your VPN has to be rock solid, you need good threat intel, and you got to be constantly on the lookout for signs you've been compromised. There's no silver bullet, it's a whole bunch of stuff working together.
Yeah, it makes you realize how much you need to be proactive, You can't just wait for something bad to happen and then try to fix it. And that kind of brings us to AI, right? This double-edged sword, amazing potential, but also some scary risks.
Totally. AI is everywhere now, and that's both super exciting and, yeah, kind of scary. Like Cisco is using AI to defend against AI-powered attacks. Did you see that?
Yeah, I was reading about it. It's kind of mind-blowing. Cisco's calling it AI defense. Their AI is basically scanning network traffic, trying to spot AI workflows, and then they're doing something called model validation to see if there's anything suspicious.
Yeah, it's wild. So basically, they're checking if the AI itself has been hacked, which is like, whoa.
So it's like AI fighting AI. Can you break down model validation a bit more for us?
Okay, imagine you got this AI trained to spot credit card fraud, right? Model validation is like checking that the AI is still doing its job correctly. Is it seeing weird stuff in the data? Has it been messed with? It's a security checkup for your AI.
Okay, I get it. That's smart. It's like having someone watching the security guard. But there's this weird thing where, like, executives are so excited about AI, but seem to forget about security.
Yeah, definitely tension there. NTT Data, they did the survey and found that almost 90% of execs are worried about AI security, but they still think the benefits outweigh the risks. Tough spot for CISOs, trying to keep up with all this while also, making sure everything's actually secure.
It's like innovate fast, but also be secure, which can be hard to balance. Are there any examples where AI is actually helping with security, not just creating more problems?
Oh, for sure. Sweet Security, they just launched this cool cloud detection engine that uses these big language models, right? It cuts down on all the noise, all those alerts that aren't actually important so you can focus on the real threats. They say it has a really low false positive rate, which is huge.
Okay, that's good to hear. It's not all bad news then. There's some good stuff happening too.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, understanding the risks, but also seeing the opportunities.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's talk about what's happening internationally. We got some really interesting stories, old school internet history stuff, and some more serious stuff about malware takedowns. Oh yeah, let's start with the history lesson. Did you see that they found the very first internet password.
I know, right? This guy, Peter Kirstein, he created it back in '73 to protect the UK's connection to ARPANET, which was like the OG internet. It's a good reminder that security has been a thing since, like, forever.
I wonder if he ever imagined it would become a historical artifact.
Okay.
But on a more serious note, this PlugX malware takedown is pretty big news.
Huge. You had French, US, and European authorities all working together to get this malware off of thousands of computers around the world. It was linked to China, and it was causing a lot of damage.
That's impressive, but also kind of makes you think, right? They were remotely accessing private devices, even if it was for a good reason. Where's the line between security and privacy?
Right, it's a tough question. It's great that they stopped the malware, but it does raise some serious questions about how far we can go, even in the name of security. And it's only going to get more complicated as we rely more and more on connected devices.
Definitely something to think about. So speaking of governments taking action, the Biden administration just put out this huge cybersecurity order. They want to make things a lot more secure here in the U.S.
Yeah, and a big focus is on digital identity, like really strong digital IDs to fight cybercrime. They want to make it easier for people to use digital IDs for things like government benefits, and they're encouraging states to develop their own digital ID systems, too.
Interesting. Digital identity is a big topic, but this is coming out as the Biden administration is ending, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of up in the air how much of this will actually happen. The next administration might have totally different priorities, and that could change the game for cybersecurity in the U.S.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then you have Australia. They're getting really serious about foreign interference.
Yeah, they're facing a lot of threats, everything from spying to disinformation campaigns to attacks on critical infrastructure. They set up a whole task force to deal with it, and they're focusing on protecting vulnerable communities, democratic institutions, key industries, you name it.
Sounds like they're not taking any chances.
Yeah.
What are they most worried about?
I mean, it's a whole range of things, you know. Surveillance, obviously, that's a big one. Disinformation, trying to mess with elections, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's intellectual property theft, trying to steal secrets from businesses and universities. They're not messing around. They've even beefed up their laws to give them more power to fight back.
Wow, it's clear they're taking this stuff seriously.
Yeah.
It's interesting how different countries are approaching these challenges, right?
Totally. And you know, what's really interesting is how the overall approach to cybersecurity is changing. It's not just about tools anymore. It's about having a solid strategy, thinking about security from the ground up.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like, data privacy is a good example, right? It's not just about checking boxes and complying with rules. It's about building trust with customers and managing risk.
Exactly. It's a shift in mindset, you know? And another thing that's changing is how CISOs and CFOs need to work together. They got to be on the same page when it comes to cyber risk.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are some challenges there, right?
Oh, for sure. CFOs, they love to see a clear return on investment, right? But with cybersecurity, it's not always so easy to measure. Like, how do you put a dollar value on preventing a data breach?
Right. It's not like buying a new piece of equipment where you can see exactly what you're getting.
Exactly. And that can make it tough to justify the investment. One thing people are talking about is reverse mentoring, where the CISO and the CFO basically teach each other about their worlds. So the CFO can learn about security risks and the CISO can learn about financial stuff. That way they can understand each other better and make better decisions together.
I love that. That's such a good idea. It seems like communication and collaboration are becoming more and more important in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. So before we move on, anything else in these stories that's really stuck with you?
I'm really intrigued by this idea of cybersecurity tools becoming obsolete. Like what worked yesterday might not work today. And I'm also super curious to learn more about what Australia is doing to fight foreign interference. They seem to be really ahead of the game on that.
Yeah, great points. Let's dive deeper into those topics and more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so you mentioned some cybersecurity tools being ready for retirement. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, think of it like this. The tools and tactics in cybersecurity are constantly evolving. What was considered cutting edge a few years ago might be completely ineffective against today's sophisticated threats.
So which tools are on the chopping block?
Some familiar names are on the list, like signature-based antivirus, outdated encryption protocols, and basic intrusion detection systems.
I'm guessing signature-based antivirus is struggling to keep up with the sheer volume and complexity of new malware.
You're exactly right. Signature-based antivirus relies on detecting known malware signatures. But modern malware is often polymorphic, meaning it can change its appearance to evade detection. It's like trying to identify a criminal who's constantly wearing different disguises.
So what's the solution?
We're seeing a shift towards behavioral-based endpoint detection and response platforms. These platforms don't just look for known signatures, they analyze system behavior for anomalies that might indicate malicious activity.
It's like having a security guard who's trained to spot suspicious behavior rather than just checking IDs. That makes a lot more sense.
Exactly. And as for those outdated encryption protocols, they're essentially leaving your data exposed.
Can you give us an example?
Think about older protocols like TLS 1.0 or 1.1. They have known vulnerabilities that attackers can exploit. Using these outdated protocols is like locking your front door with a flimsy latch. It's just not going to provide adequate protection.
So what should we be using instead?
Modern encryption standards like TLS 1.3 and strong encryption algorithms like AES 256 are much more resilient to attacks. It's like upgrading to a high-security deadbolt lock for your data.
And what about those basic intrusion detection systems? Why are they falling short?
Basic intrusion detection systems often rely on simple rule-based detection, which can be easily bypassed by sophisticated attackers. Plus, they tend to generate a ton of false positives, which can overwhelm security teams.
So they're crying wolf so often that no one pays attention when there's a real threat. What's the alternative?
Next-generation intrusion detection and prevention systems use advanced techniques like machine learning and artificial intelligence to detect and block threats much more effectively. They can analyze network traffic in real time and identify patterns of malicious behavior.
It's like having a security system that learns and adapts to the specific threats your organization faces. It's amazing how technology is changing the game in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears and delve deeper into Australia's counter-foreign interference efforts. You mentioned you were interested in learning more about how they're implementing those measures.
Yes, I'm curious about the specific steps they're taking, especially considering the range of threats they're facing.
They've taken a multifaceted approach, focusing on legislation task forces and community engagement.
Could you elaborate on that?
Well, they've strengthened legislation like the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. This act gives the government more power to intervene if critical infrastructure is at risk from foreign interference.
So it's about protecting essential services like energy, transportation, and communications. What about those task forces you mentioned?
They've established a dedicated counter-foreign interference task force to coordinate efforts across different government agencies. They also have specific task forces for universities and the technology sector, recognizing that these are prime targets for foreign interference.
That makes sense. Universities are hubs of research and innovation, and the tech sector is obviously a critical part of the economy.
Exactly. And they're not just focusing on government and industry, they're also engaging with communities to raise awareness of foreign interference tactics.
Why is community engagement so important?
Because foreign interference often targets individuals and communities. Think about disinformation campaigns designed to sow discord or influence elections. These campaigns often exploit social media and other online platforms to spread their message.
So it's about empowering individuals to be critical thinkers and to be aware of the tactics being used to manipulate them.
Precisely. Australia is recognizing that a strong defense against foreign interference requires a whole-of-society approach. It's not just about government action, it's about building resilience at the community level.
That's a really insightful perspective. It seems like Australia is taking a very comprehensive and proactive approach to addressing this complex challenge.
They're definitely at the forefront of this effort. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you'd like to explore further?
All right, so we were talking about those vulnerabilities like the Fortinet one. Why do these things keep happening? Is it just like software is complicated, or is there something bigger going on?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, it's something that keeps a lot of security folks up at night. It's not just about one company messing up. There are some fundamental issues that make these vulnerabilities so common.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
Well, for one, software is just insanely complex these days, Millions of lines of code, all these systems talking to each other, third-party components. It's a recipe for, well, mistakes.
Yeah.
It's practically impossible to build something that's 100% perfect.
Right, like one tiny error can bring the whole thing crashing down.
Exactly. And then you have this pressure to release updates super fast, got to stay ahead of the competition, right? So sometimes corners get cut, testing isn't as thorough, and boom, you got vulnerabilities.
So it's like speed versus security.
Kind of, yeah. And then the attack surface is constantly expanding too. Every time a company adopts a new cloud service rolls out more mobile devices, connects more IoT gadgets. It's like opening up another door for the bad guys to sneak in.
Oh, I see. So more connected devices, more opportunities for attacks. It's like the more windows you have in your house, the easier it is for someone to break in.
Exactly. And on top of all that, the attackers are getting smarter, using AI and automation to find and exploit these vulnerabilities faster than ever.
So it's like a constant arms race.
Yeah.
The good guys are trying to build better defenses, but the bad guys are always finding new ways to attack.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. But it's not hopeless. There are things we can do to, make things better.
Okay, good. I was starting to get a little worried there. So what can we do?
Well, first off, security has to be part of the entire software development process from the very beginning, not just tacked on at the end, like security by design. That's the idea.
Yeah, makes sense. Build it right from the start.
Right. And we need better tools, too, the kind of next-gen stuff we were talking about earlier, stuff that uses AI and machine learning to detect threats and respond faster, more effectively.
And what about us, the regular folks? What can we do to be more secure?
Awareness, that's huge. People need to know about the threats and how to protect themselves. Strong passwords, be careful with phishing emails, keep your software up to date, that kind of stuff. It's basic, but it makes a huge difference.
Like everyone needs to be part of the security team, right?
Exactly. And in the end, it comes down to collaboration. Security folks, developers, policymakers, regular people, we all need to work together to make the digital world a safer place.
Well said. It's not just about the tech, it's about the people.
Mm.
So, wow, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We talked about ransomware, AI, those outdated tools, what's happening internationally. It's a lot.
It has been a lot, but it's important stuff. It affects all of us, and the more we understand, the better prepared we'll be.
Couldn't agree more. And as always, we encourage everyone listening to stay curious, keep learning, and be part of the conversation about cybersecurity. It's an ever-changing world out there, but together, we can make it a safer one. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.